We are going to start the program today. We all are here, and I welcome from Walpala Institute side all the family members of Kitsiri Malal, Professor Kitsiri Manawadu, and Professor Kitsiri Manawudu's sisters are here and family members, and there may be some others who are joining online from other parts of the world. You all are welcome. This is a great day for us. I, as a history student, first came to know about Professor Kitsiri Manawadu through his writing, and the book was very rare. I had to take a photocopy from Perera University Library, and it is, I can't believe that we later on we met, and his collection is now here in Walpala Institute. And from today onwards, those who are coming here, the researchers can come and use the library. So I thank you all, the family members, and I thank those who, particularly Ruth, all the hard work she, to make these books to come here, all the work she, and so I thank all of you who did that great job. And I welcome, I invite Professor Sasanka Perera to deliver his speech now.
I understand from this conversation I had with Reverend Dhammanand a few days ago, and also from what he said today, that we are gathered here today to mark the occasion where Kitsiri Manawudu's or substantial section of his library is presented to the Walpala Rahula Center. In my mind, this is one of the noblest things a person can do, and that is to transfer resources that helped him or her acquire knowledge from private owners. I have to talk to Reverend Dhammanand one of these days, if I can do the same with some of my own books. Today, I want to do just three things. One, very briefly ask the question, who was Kitsiri Manawadu? And that is because, given the time that he has spent away from Sri Lanka, he is better known outside the country. And two, a brief description of his most iconic book, Buddhism in Sinhalese Society, 1750 to 1900, as its influence has still not diminished. And three, how to bring to our own country and its intellectual discourses the knowledge that scholars such as Manawadu have produced for the world. And these are the only three things I'll talk about today. So, who was Kitsiri Manawadu? He had his initial training at University of Ceylon, from where he graduated in 1964, when I was only 2 years old, and earned a DPhil from Oxford University in 1968. He taught at the Department of Sociology at University of Ceylon from 1968 to 1974. Then he taught at University of Auckland from, I think, 1974 to 1992, the year of his retirement. Given his relatively brief time in the university system in Sri Lanka, he is much better known, and his influence is more clearly felt in Buddhist studies circles beyond our country. And his home base in New Zealand sociology is only one such domain. Dr. Manawadu was effectively from my parents' generation, and I did not know him personally and have never met him. But one does not need to have a personal association with a scholar to learn from his thinking. It is in this context that I am somewhat familiar with some of his work. So let me focus a little bit on Dr. Manawadu's highly acclaimed book, Buddhism in Sinhalese Society, 1715 to 1900, a study of religious revival and change. I have specific reasons to focus on this book today, and hopefully my reasons will come clear as I conclude my thoughts. The book was initially published in 1976 by the University of California Press and republished in Sri Lanka only in 2003 by Thambapani. Unfortunately, you can see it has taken 47 years for this important work on the institutional history of Sri Lankan Buddhism to be freely available in our country. And that too, so far, only in English. It is the most comprehensive scholarly work of historical sociology on the dynamics and transformations of Buddhism as an institution in Sri Lanka at the height of Western colonialism. I draw on the preface I wrote for the 2023 Sri Lankan edition of the book in formulating my thoughts today. The Portuguese, as we know, ruled the coastal areas of the island from 1506 onwards and was followed by the Dutch from 1658 onwards. The first sustained British presence in the country was in 1796 under the British East India Company that spread across the coastal areas. And by 1815, the whole island became a British crown colony. See, Malalgoda's account begins 46 years before the arrival of the British and ends in 1900, when the island was well entrenched as a British colony. These successive colonial encounters with local socio-political conditions, what I was trying to say before the signal was lost is that these successive colonial encounters with local socio-political conditions transformed and refashioned the local dynamics, which had a profound structural impact on Buddhism as an institution. And Malalgoda's overall story describes how Buddhism acquired its many internal divisions as well as a political militancy rooted very intimately in specific local historical conditions and moments. He shows us the impact Portuguese and Dutch colonial and missionary efforts had on Buddhism and the ways in which Buddhism survived in the Kandyan kingdom under these conditions. He explains the emergence of important internal divisions that have now become part of contemporary Buddhism's institutional personality and have led to the establishment of new monastic orders. In a sense, the entire history of Sri Lankan Buddhism that Dr. Malalgoda describes in the first part of the book is a history of division, fragmentation, and shifting centers of Buddhist power in Sri Lanka in the colonial period, linked to caste affinities as well as low country and up country divisions rather than doctrinal disagreements. Part 2 of the book deals with the emergence of what Gananath Obesekara has called Protestant Buddhism. This specific version of Buddhism equipped Sri Lankan Buddhism institutionally, rhetorically, and emotionally to take on the challenges posed by the British and American Christian missionary enterprise that became extremely powerful by the middle of the 19th century. He describes in detail how this response appropriated some key institutional mechanisms and schools of the missionary enterprise itself, such as schools and the printing press, how it was funded by the newly emergent Buddhist middle class who made their money in the colonial economy, the ways in which the laity collaborated with monks in a way that was quite new in Buddhist history, and finally, also the role of the Theosophical Society in this new revival. Other authoritative histories and ethnographic readings have since been written on the period that followed, which has broadened the work Malalgoda began. Among many, these latter expansions include works such as Rituals of the Kandyan State and the work of Kings by H.L. Seneviratna, and Buddhism Transformed Religious Change in Sri Lanka by Richard Gombrich and Gananath Obesekar, and many more. In my mind, these works on the latter histories on Sri Lankan Buddhism would not have been possible if not for the foundational work of Kitsiri Malalgoda. So I opted to talk about this book today in this kind of detail for several reasons, which are very specific to Sri Lanka. One is it is truly a seminal book that provided the basis for almost all other work on the institutional histories and practices of Sri Lankan Buddhism. Despite its foundational value and continued historical relevance, it remains largely unknown in Sri Lanka, particularly among people educated in local languages alone. By that I mean Sinhala and Tamil. Secondly, this is a classic example of how historical sociology or sociology of any kind should be done at a time reflective and scholarly efforts in sociology in particular and social sciences in general in our country fail to show much promise. For me, this work is a sign that might allow our social sciences to reinvent ourselves in a way we can influence the world if we follow the kind of rigorous research and methodological insight it offers. Now, let me come to the final point I want to address today, and it's related to this book as well as other scholarly enterprises like that. That is, how can we bring to our own country and its intellectual discourses the knowledge that scholars such as Manawadu have produced for the world? Now, Kitsiri Manawadu and the names that I mentioned along with him just now may have begun their lives in Sri Lanka, but they are global scholars. They produce their knowledge for the world. So the question we can then ask in the context of this global scholarship is, do we simply let this knowledge pass by, as we have done so far, and allow ourselves to become victims of the intellectual poverty this will necessarily entail? For me, this is a very serious issue that has hitherto remained unaddressed at an institutional level. There is no point arguing, as we have been doing like a failed mantra since independence, that everyone should learn English. This is not going to happen. We know this simply has not worked in the past, and it is very unlikely to work in the future, both due to policy failures on language of instruction in schools and universities, as well as due to the relative lack of language infrastructure in our country to offer people more comprehensive instruction in functional English. Knowledge that we consider crucial, whether it be about our own society and culture, as in the case of Manawudu's work, or matters of theory and philosophy more generally, from post-structuralism and what came before that to decolonial theory, must necessarily come to our young people from our own languages. I don't think there should be any confusion about that. English can only be a secondary source of additional and more enhanced information. Economically more powerful countries like China and Japan have done this with reasonable degree of success. We also as a country began this in the 1950s with considerable vision even before Dr. Manawadu migrated to New Zealand. But like most of post-colonial efforts, this also failed due to lack of consistency in planning. I'm not going to go into details of this. As a result, knowledge produced not only by Dr. Manawadu, but others who have also worked on Sri Lanka is not accessible to most of our people. As a country, we are merely what sociologists might call the field to study and not a space for intellectual engagement based on what is studied and what is written about. But it is not the business of the scholars who produce such knowledge to make them accessible to our people in our own language. It should be our business, the people who have opted to work in this country. There are only a handful of exceptions over the years about when it comes to books that have been rendered into either Sinhala or Tamil or both. For example, Brenda and Charles Seligman's ethnography Vedas, published in 1911, came to our readers as a Sinhala translation by Chandra Sri Ranasinghe 100 years later in 2010. Still nothing in Tamil. There are very few others that one can add to this exception. Crucial works like Gananath Obesekara's The Cult of the Goddess Pattini and all of his other works, H.L. Seneviratne's Ritual of the Kandyan State and all of his other books, and many other important works by other scholars are not available in Sinhala or Tamil. And even in English, many of these works are not available in local repositories. And this is what Reverend Dhammananda was referring to Malalgoda's own book when he said that he had to find a photocopy from the library of the University of Perera because it was unavailable until 2023 when some of us took the decision to republish in Sri Lanka. But there are two very recent exceptions to this scheme of things. For example, Dileepa Vitarana's book, Negotiating Power and Constructing the Nation, Engineering in Sri Lanka, published in Colombo in 2022, published in English in Colombo in 2022, was made available as a translation in Sinhala in 2025. Similarly, Harshana Rambukwella's book, The Politics and Poetics of Authenticity, a cultural genealogy of Sinhala nationalism, initially published in 2018 in London, was made available in Sinhala in 2024. But these are simply exceptions or accidents that happen due to the interests of the authors and committed and skilled translators. My question is, can we not make these accidents of personal interest be made into a sustained process so that we can make available at least selected works that are relevant to our country? For me, this should include works based on research in Sri Lanka, as well as others that may be of intellectual relevance, be they abstract philosophical works or historical and ethnographic works that may have nothing directly to do with Sri Lanka, but still relevant. After all, the world of scholarship cannot be parochially national or nationalized. I hope the occasion the Walpola Rahula Institute accepts the books from the Kitsiri Malalgoda collection. At least some of us will begin to think more seriously on these lines and help initiate and institutionalize, maybe in the Walpola Rahula Institute itself, this kind of knowledge transfer efforts. Perhaps this can be initiated by making available Buddhism in Sinhalese society in Sinhala and Tamil in times to come. I wish everyone a good day and a meaningful Vesak. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Professor Sasanka. Dr. Ruth, please take this opportunity to share your memories of Professor Malalgoda.
So I was asked to just recall some memories of Kitsiri. And also I'm going to talk about the gathering together of the books that you are now going to allow put out for the public to use. So I first met Kitsiri, or Kit as he was known to his friends and colleagues in Auckland, as a colleague and later as a PhD supervisor before he took early retirement to focus on his writing. We lived in the same area and we walked home together, dodging the showers or stopping to chat and watch the sun go down. And we did that for a number of years. And over time, those walks and chats developed into what became a lifelong friendship. So I came to know a person who was a very kind and patient person. He was very intelligent and sharp and someone with a great sense of humor. He also had a very strong quirky side. And I remember, for example, one day outing him watching children's programs on TV when I discovered he could sing the Womble songs all the way through and knew all the words. So he had sort of a fun side to him as well. While he enjoyed the company of others, he lived quite an ascetic and minimalist lifestyle in terms of possessions. And one of the strong driving forces behind the minimalism in his personal possessions was he had quite a small apartment and he really prioritized maximizing space for his books. His book collection was very important to him, very important and highly valued. And as the apartment was very small that he had, and there was always one more book to acquire, he became very creative. So every available space in his apartment was turned into book storage. Shoeboxes in the wardrobes did not have shoes in them. The spaces behind the pots in the kitchen cupboards were fully utilised for books, and nothing was as it seemed. Even when I thought I'd found all of the books, the most unlikely nooks and crannies were still harbouring more. And as were the 2 off-site storage lockers that he also had for books. And in fact, I came to realise that the books existed as a constantly moving filing system where they came and went and were brought in and out of the storage areas depending on what he was researching. So he was never able to tell me that this is where the books on this topic are. It was in constant movement. His greatest desire was that his collection would stay together and it would be used by researchers and students to advance Buddhist and Asian studies and to raise the profile and knowledge about Sri Lanka in Australasia. Fulfilling this desire turned out to be more challenging than it initially appeared. Even finding boxes that would efficiently hold B-size books was a mission in an A4 size world. But after a number of dedicated efforts by the key players in this story, we have the outcome that we're celebrating today. And there was a number of people all came into that. When I'll just sort of run you very briefly through the story of how it all evolved. So when I became involved, Kitseri had already reached out to Professor Ben Chantal, who is present today, to investigate the possibility of donating his books to the Otago University Library. The library had limited capacity and their requirements for donations were quite challenging for so many books. A book list with the details of each book and ultimately a champion was also needed. So it was a big job getting those books all written down. I went to work on the book list and Kitseri kept his fingers crossed for Otago while resigning himself to the greater part of his collection being either homeless or broken up. When he passed away, I kept on looking and Professor Ben Chantal provided a recommendation for the Walpola Rahula Centre. It was only much later that I realised that the monk that Kit's brother Tissa had also suggested was in fact the same person, the Venerable Dhammananda today. He responded immediately when I contacted him, but it was not yet plain sailing. While the Otago books had got stuck on the back of a truck in a once-in-a-century floods in New Zealand with the main bridges out, the larger part of the collection being open today also had its own challenges, making its way to Sri Lanka and through the Sri Lankan customs, where the Venerable Dhammananda has needed to step in to rescue them. So I'd like to express my heartfelt thanks to all those who helped bring about this great outcome for the collection, especially the Venerable Dhammananda and Kitseri's brother Tissa. Kitseri was very proud of his book collection and he would be absolutely delighted and gratified at the efforts that have been made and to know that the larger part of his collection has been able to stay together and has managed to find such a worthy home here at the Walpola Rahula Centre Institute, and where it can continue to support students and research and be accessible to anyone who has an interest in the subjects that it covers. I can't think of a better tribute to Kitseri. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ruth, and thank you for sharing your memories and the history behind and until the books reach here, and we're really grateful for your contribution. And I invite Nishadhi from the family to share some words with us. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. So Professor Kitseri Manawadu was just Kitseri Bapa for me. Actually, These are a few words that I penned together with my father, who I actually wanted to be the person talking here, but very similar to Kitsiri Papa. Everybody in the Manawadu family just hates the spotlight, so here I am talking on behalf of the entire Manawadu family. So Kitsiri Papa was born on the 1st of September 1942. He was the 6th child from a very modest family of 8 children, 4 boys, 4 girls, from the deep south of Amatara. So all of them had their primary education from the nearby schools, Rahula College and Sujata Vidyalaya. During this period, something my father always tells me is that it had struck among the minds of the closely knitted family how gifted Kitsiri Papa was even as a child. It had been observed that he was the brightest pupil in every class he attended. So despite the economic hardships, he just sailed his way from kindergarten all the way to the University of Perera. So by the time he was 22, he had achieved first class honors in sociology under the able guidance of his Guru Gananathu Besekara. He did a stint at the university thereafter and was selected as the Rhodes Scholar, a very high point in his life, from Sri Lanka in the year 1965 to study at the Oxford University. And he went on to do his PhD too at Oxford. He returned to his University of Perera briefly before moving for good to New Zealand for a lecturer post at the University of Auckland. Thereafter, for 50 long years, as you heard from Dr. Ruth as well, in New Zealand was his home. He lived the life of a scholar in Auckland, producing really valuable and very carefully researched articles, one of which Professor Sasanka spoke about, which remains a classic to this day. So for me personally, memories of Kitsiri Papa spans from my very young days of maybe 9 or 10, when me and my cousins, some of whom who are seated here, would eagerly wait for him to visit from New Zealand so that we can sit around the kitchen table and play a non-stop round of 304, the card game. And also all the way to my very first mobile phone, a Nokia 3310, which he bought for me when I got selected to the university. And all the way to the little toy octopus he brought down for my first-born daughter, who's the only one who actually had the luck of actually meeting him. Although that same octopus, my 1-year-old still plays with, which I am very fond of. All my kids are very fond of because it reminds them of Kitsia. I fondly recall his modesty, his charm, his sharp wit, his valuable insights on any subject we would bring in front of him, and his great sense of humor, which kept all his nieces and nephews glued to him whenever he would come for a visit. Although in the olden days our correspondence was quite far and few between, from the moment I actually got my own email account, we stayed in touch very regularly, and we exchanged emails until his very last days. He was in essence a happy, self-contained, fiercely independent, simple soul. He was an avid and deep reader with a very wide range of interests. When he visits home, all he would do is spend his time going back and forth by bus to libraries and different bookshops. He would purchase a large stock of books to be taken back to Auckland. That's basically what all his luggage was. Towards the end of 2014, we received the distressing news of his failing health. We were very worried as he lived alone and presumed that he would not take care of himself properly and would not get the care that is needed. But Kitsiri Papa quickly assured us that he has so many dear friends in New Zealand. Professor Clooney, which I saw is joined in today as well, and his wife Sissy, who also visited us in Sri Lanka when he came for some treatment to Sri Lanka also back in around 2016. We are very grateful for them. We are very grateful to them for the enormous work they carried out in assisting him till his passing in October 2019 and thereafter. And Dr. Ruth, who just spoke, who was also a very dear friend of Kitsiri Bappa, who was also entrusted with that monumental, humongous amount of work that came with finding a suitable home for his books. She had catalogued his entire book collection, which was thousands and thousands of books, just like she spoke. And she distributed them to deserving libraries. So a huge part of that is what we will be witnessing today in the Manawadu collection here. And she did that while traveling back and forth between Australia and New Zealand and doing all the coordination in the midst of the height of the pandemic. So that was no easy feat for sure. So I actually got all those updates from Tata. Tata kept in touch with Dr. Ruth during that entire time, which just seemed like an impossible task to pull off, which she very skillfully did. And what you will see here today will also be probably a fraction of his entire collection. So we are very thankful to Dr. Ruth for all she did in distributing these books. Last but not least, I take this opportunity to thank respectfully Reverend Dhammananda and his assistants for their tireless efforts and dedication in setting up this Kitsiri Manawadu collection. We wish, hope and pray that future generations of students and researchers would make use of this wonderful legacy kept behind by Kitsiri Bappa. Thank you.
So thank you, Nishadhi. Thank you very much, and representing the family, sharing these thoughts. Now, Dileepa Manawadu, Dileepa, she will deliver the vote of thanks. Yeah.
I feel the entire program was full of gratitude and thanks to different people, and my task is just to repeat as a closure to the program. For me personally, it's a really humbling day today, thinking that there's this scholar who was born in Sri Lanka, then left to New Zealand, and then now I discovered that there's been a chance meeting somewhere else with the family, and how all these things connect. And Perera was referring earlier in the meditation program about how things are so interconnected and interdependent, and we really don't know how things originate and end up. And here we are in a very happy place today. So I'm personally grateful to be here sharing this occasion. First of all, I want to thank the Manawadu family for, entrusting this fabulous, very valuable collection of books, Professor Kitsiri Manawadu collection, to the world through the Walpala Rahula Institute and the Walpala Rahula Foundation Trust. And of course, I think Professor Sasanka mentioned about a challenge in a way, but also something for us to do in terms of making it more accessible to the local languages so more people can actually gain from the knowledge that's been already created and then contribute to more knowledge creation and dissemination. So recognizing that too. I have my notes, so I hope I don't miss. Then, of course, Nishadhi, thank you so much for sharing snippets from your family experiences of this person, of Professor Manawadu, from a human being perspective. That was also really interesting to know of Professor Manawadu as a human being, sharing and caring with a large family. Then Dr. Ruth Habgood, I hope I got the surname right, for the coordination of this massively challenging operation. I got to know of the challenge when it reached customs here. And that was an adventure that Venerable Theo shared with us. And that's how I actually got to know there is a collection that's very important collection that's coming through, and interesting stories with Sri Lanka customs. But yes, so thank you, Dr. Ruth. I hope she's still here with us online. And also for sharing snippets of his life in New Zealand, and how he held the book collection, what his thoughts about the book collection was, and making it even more important for us to realize that the gravity of what we are holding here in the library now. And for all the professors, friends of Professor Manawadu who's joining us from New Zealand, thank you for being here. Professor Sasanka, for at very short notice, I believe, took his time off to deliver his thoughts on Professor Manawadu collection, and for the thought of saying how do we take this forward, how do we make it more accessible to more people in Sri Lanka with Sinhala and Tamil translations. For all friends joining from Sydney, as quite a number of them helped with the library refurbishment. Venerable Theo mentioned that the library needed a big refurbishment, which took quite some time to do, and it's done now. So finally we are ready to share this with others who want to make use of it. So thank you for all the lovely work and the contributions made to make it happen. And also the library lighting was again from a different part of the world, Mr. Ravi from Dubai, who helped with the refurbishment process. And last but not least, to Vatsala, who's just walked, Vatsala and Chaturika are missing right now, probably at the library already. I've seen personally how much time and effort they put in here. It was tremendously difficult work that they did over so many months, I would say. So thank you, Chaturika and Vatsala, for again making it happen so that the library can be given to the rest of the people to make use of. Apologies if I missed anyone, and thank you again.